The year is 1989. The world is vast and green. And while it may look different in shape, things have hope. But there's a sense in the air that has been building. People know that something is coming, and most likely this war will spark the end of the world as they know it. But few know just how strange things will become. Today's story will be just about that.
Опасности северных границ Израиля. Выступая на пресс-конференции,
is the wartime broadcasting service. This country has been attacked with nuclear weapons. Communications have been severely. The number of casualties and the extent of the damage are not yet known.
Четвертый фактор – радиоактивное заражение местности, образующееся при наземных взрывах. При взрыве образуется огромное количество радиоактивных веществ.
One of the last men in space has just witnessed a blinding hour. For many, this would mark the end of hope. But this cosmonaut would not realize how many lives he would influence, and just how much his voice would represent hope in this new world. His transmissions included things like the news, classic hits that he had, alongside just chats and stories. His show, for the first few weeks, being completely in Russian. However, as time would go on, more would find his frequency, and with it, his show started becoming bilingual. Some hours would be in Russian, and shortly followed by some in English. Within these first few weeks, contact was made, and one of the first news stories would emerge.
Вчера я получил послание. Люди говорят про тех, кто путешествует по поверхности, не обремененные старыми законами. Будь то закон советов или закон природы. Они делятся своими историями о свободе, о надежде. Они называют себя мироходцы. Новое утро, новая история. Охотники в белом, что промышляют на пепелищах, говорят, что нашли дерево, которое живет вопреки всему. Они несут с собой фото и вести об этом дереве. Еще теплится надежда в нашей земле, на нашей великой родине. Сегодня начинает свой отсчет великое паломничество. Многие были вдохновлены вестями и отправляются на пепелище. в надежде найти земли обетованные.
In the northern region of Russia, now known as Volga City, is a place called Siberia. A group by the name of world walkers, or known as globetrotters by those in the West, is formed, and they are among the first people accounted on the surface, their story broadcasted across the world. In the following years they would become a faction and a group known to be mappers and explorers. Much like centuries past, they were embarking on a brave journey and marking the new world. Many began to call Serbia Virai, as it is what the locals and mappers began calling this region, exploring areas of the world that had just formed, these new landmarks of obscurity, mapping what they'd find, drawing up depictions of creatures they'd seen, and losing many, but in turn gaining knowledge. Though this faction is still shrouded in mystery, and has been for many years due to their approach of not oversharing, from the years 1990 onwards they grew, as tales would begin to spread of this tree, their miracle they called it. And many started to view this as a pilgrimage to something akin to God, as if this was their Jerusalem. This tree would represent for many a journey they must make, a journey that would take many's lives, but in turn many would make it and they would not be heard from again, instead living their life out in Virai. However, this journey for the world walkers would not be easy. They would lose many people, as in the beginning not much was known of what was left. But they started to learn, and they began creating suits akin to what they'd wear pre-war, but now pad them in what they could to stop radiation. And they would make trips to try find new livestock, as many of the old livestock would die and wasn't ready to adapt. It took many years, but they began to develop what some would call their own version of a safe suit, and while it's ugly, it began to take shape, still keeping a hold of those old traditions. Eventually, one of these days, in the first year of their exploring on top, trying to survive, as where they lived, they weren't able to find any bunkers, they managed to make a sort of makeshift underground city. At least that's what people say. These burrows that would go into this mountain, almost akin to that of a cave network, turned into somewhere to live, to try escape the surface. On one of these journeys, before they became mappers, whilst exploring, they found the tree, and it eventually became this symbol, and then a story, and then a miracle, and then a tale that would go across the world and would be featured in newspapers from the Unbroken Kingdom all the way and onwards. They were discovering life, and with it they would keep exploring. Eventually they would make new ranks in their faction and have explorers, brave men that would venture onwards, mapping it out, daring to mark what they'd find, and hoping to bring back something that would strengthen their chances of living. Slowly but surely, they would establish a more sophisticated outfit and would be called by many mappers. They would explore bravely the unknown, these shards, in the hopes of following these pathways to find unique equipment, new life, and they would try bring back whatever they could, whether it be livestock or just simply more information, always making sure to map out every detail they could, hoping to build up what would become, to many, a goldmine of information of this northern sector of the world, traveling hundreds of miles as this faction would grow and slowly branch off to have these smaller tribes. However, one thing that would be featured across all of their factions' ranks is this key sense of iconography, this symbol that follows the legs upwards, branching out, with at the top featuring what looks like a tree, or some say looks like a mushroom cloud, almost this symbolic symbol that sort of shows their remembrance of what's happened, but the miracle that is their tree. They would feature tungsten gas masks that are very stylized and unique, along with weaponry from the Soviet Union, and a suit that was as best as it could be, with some form of device to communicate, all whilst making sure that they could, as best as possible, map the future. Eventually, news would reach this somewhat excluded faction in the middle of nowhere, just living and exploring, and would reach them that their story had somehow made it, maybe through their kindness, to up above, a radio broadcast, and they would begin fully documenting their expeditions, and with it they would take images of their findings, and slowly but surely these images would, through simply spreading, make it to news stations, and newspapers would be printed with their images and their names, and over time it sort of became what the world was watching, because there wasn't much to do during those first few years in darkness. But there was always this group fully out there exploring, hoping that even though the consequences were harsh, it was worth it. And eventually, these newspapers would be featuring their descriptions and their findings. One of the first was Lichberg figures, as it was labeled by many Western newspapers. These trees that would seemingly reach out in this darkness. Even though there was no sunlight, in these shards they would live, and they'd take on a new sort of strange shape. Some of their writings claiming that in the night it felt as if the tree had moved forward towards them. Alongside that, they would document their first finding of a suitable animal in this new world that would become their kind of horse mixed with a cow. They simply called them buffalo. However, they would pronounce it like this.
Buffalo.
And it was a great find for this faction that was surviving on what they could find. They now could actually sustain life, travel further, and also move in packs. And then slowly but surely, as time would move on, more would make their way to the surface, and with it, less would be heard of the World Walkers, other than stories of people making the pilgrimage all the way there. And slowly, over time, more mystery would shroud this faction that was not really a faction anymore, as it grew so large that it was more a collective group, much like a race in a way. They were all just living in this new world, and were simply the first that were brave enough to mark and map what was the unknown. I really hope you enjoyed that more cool lore intro. I want to try this year to do a few videos now and then that are what I would say are higher effort, with more art, and are more trying to make you feel immersed. I wanted to interrupt the video to put this part in just here to say the intro was made by this great tool that I'm going to shout out as much as I can, and I'll mention it in every future video when I put it, because I will be putting it in more videos, because I plan to do a video on different parts of the world throughout this year. But I want to say a huge shout out to this tool on screen right now. Unbelievable. Like, you can use to make clouds and makeshift planets. And if you just do some finicking around in Blender, you can use the images, add some depth, and then boom, you have what looks like a real world. But now I'm going to do my usual thing where I talk through the art, and if you're interested you can stay here and I'll give you some little extra bits of lore that I might have not felt were needed, or necessary to mention. But I had an absolute blast working on this, and I want to say a giant thank you. I'll put it in the label. I want to say thank you to Not a Beaver. Couldn't have found a lot of this stuff out and done a lot of these prompts such as the stamp and a lot of the labeling and naming of this faction without his help, because AI is not great at a lot of things, and it's definitely not great at understanding how Russian works, and also a lot of trying to figure out about Russia and its history is kind of difficult. It's kind of relatively censored, and it's really difficult to just, find out information about this stuff without it feeling a bit one-sided or swayed in one direction. So I want to say a giant thank you to Not a Beaver for the intro recording of his Spaceman, and a giant thank you for him naming a part of the world. Now forever Russia will be called Volga City, which he named, and I wanted to do that as a thank you to him. And a future video about naming parts of the map will be coming up, so stick around and you might be able to name a part of Barren. But now let's get into the art, I suppose. I really wanted to make sure that during creating this video that I was going to have this idea of progression. So I started out with that reference on screen, and I wanted to keep to some of the looks that I saw when I was trying to base them off of the real world, which I'll try put on screen. So I kept the original shape and outfit and just added on it, some bits of a makeshift gas mask, followed up by their boots, and then followed up by them kind of trying to somewhat armor themselves. However, early on, as I mentioned, they were simply surviving. So for me, it didn't really make sense to have them be, with armor and then a weapon and then so on. It just felt a little bit silly. Then following on from that, I designed the Rangers, which might be one of my favorite designs I've done in a very long time for an outfit. I kept it simple. I just thought, does it really make sense for... When you look at people that climb Everest, they take what they need, and same for all great explorers, they take what they need. So I just thought, when I first designed it, I thought, I'm going to go with some like armor and stuff, and then the more I thought about it, I went, they're not particularly violent, they don't want to go and take over land, they simply want to explore and make sure that they can get good resources. So it kind of made sense for me to put them in a kind of radiation suit that looked warm. On the inside, I didn't illustrate it, but on the inside is this kind of fur coat with this layer of radiation protection. I think it's called like tungsten lining or something. It's like in spacesuits. I forgot the name of it. But they have that sort of layer of protection. Now that doesn't mean that they don't, get sick and die, a lot of them. But it means that they can explore for longer, followed by the gloves for the heating, the boots that are, I think, sick. They're based on real boots, which the more I looked into this part of the world, I found it fascinating. Reading about, I guess, what they believe in and what a lot of them live like, how different their lives are. And I had a lot of fun trying to make sure that the gas mask was cool. So I hope you like the design. I kind of just had this idea of like, what if it was like a face panel kind of mask that looked tribal in a way, but not like obtusely tribal, like in the sense that you might look at it and go, okay, so this person just wanted to make them look like they were tribal, because they're not really. So I try to make it look decorated and kind of fancy in a way, and it was based on this image I found. And then obviously they're adjourned, or obviously they're equipped with Soviet weapons. I like to take weapons and kind of make them different, because Barren is old history, so it is a kind of mix of a few guns. Put in the comments if you can figure out what guns I've kind of used and figured out and mixed together. But I love the way this thing looks, and I just figured, let's make the design nice and clean. I feel like this year I really want to focus on making more things catching rather than insanely detailed every time. So I thought, you know what, I could add all these bits of armor and so on, like the postilions, but they're not trying to face the monsters. You know, they're not going out there with the idea of going through the monsters to get something. They're more taking the approach of, let's try survive out here, map it out, get home safe. They're not trying to charge at anything or fight anything unless they need to. And I really had a lot of fun designing that outfit, so I hope you like it. I'm pretty happy with it. Followed on by their logo, which I actually did after I designed the Rangers and then added the symbol, and it really finished the outfit. I'll see if I can find a picture of it without it. But it's amazing how like those small little things can just like kind of take a design to that point where you go, oh, I think it's finished. And I love that when that happens in art. I love this logo. I thought, okay, I was thinking I wanted it to look like a tree. And then without even thinking about it, I designed it, and I sort of looked at it and went, oh, it kind of looks like a mushroom cloud. And then I just thought, that's perfect. It's like, to them, the miracle is the tree, but also they don't forget what caused this. And the only thing I will say about this faction is they are very much on the side of anti-government. They don't particularly like being told what to do, especially because of what happened. And that's about the only thing that they're super angry about, is if, you know, someone was trying to force them, you know, like, for example, if the Soviet government was trying to say, you can't have this land anymore because things are going back to how they were, they wouldn't take kindly to that. They'd sort of be like, how about fuck off? So, yeah, that's the only thing I would say about this faction, is that the idea was they are true, they really are about freedom. They want freedom from restraints of the past worlds, and they especially don't want to be told what to do by people that ended the world. But probably the thing I'm most proud of, which I put on the thumbnail, I think, is the stamp. I'm so proud of this thing. I was trying so long to give it that look, and I'll put a few stamps on the screen if I can. Russia has these stamps that are just, I mean, they look beautiful, to be honest. They are, like, stunning. And something that people don't talk about enough is, like, why is Soviet artwork so good? You know, for a nation that, was very suppressed and not allowed to really speak out, is everybody agreeing that propaganda art is just, it just slaps? I mean, why is, the art is just way too good. You know what it feels like? It feels like when you see an artist on ArtStation that is drawing furries, and you're like, why? Because you're really good. That's what propaganda art feels like. It's like, that guy's too good to be drawing that. And I love these stamps. And they inspired me so much that I thought I was going to do a whole piece of art where it was just going to be him standing on a background, and it was going to be awkward. And then I thought, you know what? What better way to make him have a face, the voice you heard, than showing his stamp before he went up. And I'm so happy with how it came out. I put the barren earth there, and yeah, I loved it. And thank you for the help again, Not a Beaver, for making it look and like telling me what to write so that it makes sense. And everything on here actually makes sense. So if you want to read it, and you're Russian, you can read it. followed by that I did a few pieces that were kind of me taking other images and then making them look a certain way, like the Blinding Hour image is using a real image to just make it look like he's seeing the end of the world from above. But then ones that I'm really proud of that I drew from scratch. The tree I'm really happy with, but most of all, I'm so unbelievably happy with the shard. I mean, I don't know if I've ever made a piece of artwork that has had this much... Well, I've done book covers that maybe have this much detail, but I get paid to do that for a living. But I mean, yeah. I really tried my best on this. And it all really came together, and I was so happy because I did a stream where I spoke about how I needed to add a person into the image and I couldn't make it work. And then I went back and I thought, why don't I just put the ranger in the image? And then I put him in, and he just fit right in. He just worked. And I was like, oh, there you go. I love this image. I think this is the only first true look at a shard. This image is from the Northern Shard, which will be on screen right now. Named after them. And yeah, it is very... Yeah, I'm just very proud of it. I think it's very cool. And I want to do a lot more art of this. And I want to say a huge thank you. I will put it probably in the middle of the video or at the end. Like I always do, I want to say a huge thank you to the people that support on Patreon to get all the extra like sketches. Like right now I've got a few sketches on there for a future video coming up. Or the people that buy the 3D models over on the store. Because I managed to get a new iPad and it means that I can do 3D. So there shall be 3D soon, and that means more environments, more art, more cool stuff. I can't wait for that. And when I was making this video, because of the new iPad, I had 122 layers to work on, and I used every layer to do all of these different parts, and I'm so happy with it. So thank you to you guys. Genuinely, huge thank you. Now onto the animal. I just kept it simple for this. I thought, you know what? I don't want to make it too complicated or too weird or strange. The idea was simply a kind of buffalo-like creature that is kind of ugly, cute. That's what I would say a lot of things in Barren are. Ugly, cute. I would say this thing's pretty ugly, cute. I don't know. What do you guys think? It's not ugly. It's just kind of a little bit fucked up. And I think the idea was that it can provide them food. It can be made to carry things, but it also is apparently a nice companion. And they are pretty big, but not overly big. These things are much like the Bulwark in the sense that I think these two things in games would be the things that everybody thinks are cute. And I imagine these things are pretty nice and friendly. So I'm really happy with the face design more than anything. And I thought that the saddle I made looked kind of cool. It looks pretty decent, I think. Now onto the statues. They will be in the artwork that you saw. This was part of the collab that I did a week ago. Well, it was longer than a week ago for me, but I think the video should be about a week ago now. And a huge thank you to Winter, who will be featured in an upcoming video. And yeah, I really like this design. The idea is that basically it'll be mentioned in that future video actually in depth. But essentially, as shown in that image with the statue kind of next to the ranger or the mapper, they, over time, started finding these kind of statue-like forms that they started thinking were members of these factions that had died in various ways and sort of became part of the landscape. And so these kind of myths started coming out that they're sort of there standing with their weapons at the ready, spiked and all rocky, but they have various shapes. As you can see in the artwork I showed, I've got one that's kind of reaching out upwards with this kind of mouth head that's like open to eat anything, and a ranger is standing next to one, sort of in an image that would be put on a newspaper. Yeah, really happy with that. And by the way, I had to I'm gonna do it anyway later on. I promised myself I wouldn't, because I need to stop doing it, but I have to. There's just something in my brain. I was like really thinking for this video, I'm gonna design like a full newspaper cover of that thing I mentioned. But then I thought, okay, no, I've already put the video off for way too long, because I've been I keep making what normally used to happen when I made videos before is, and I hope you don't mind this being more chatty, because I figured the intro and stuff was so like lore serious that I just thought this end part I'm just gonna like sit back and chat. What normally happens with my previous videos is I'm sort of like ADHD, in the sense that I get in like these flow states where I just need to like make things. And normally what happens is I hit a layer limit, and then I go, okay, I'm gonna have to make the video now. But I kept not hitting the limit, so then I kept just making more things, because that's really what I could do. I mean, I could just keep drawing and adding things. But eventually I hit the layer limit, and then I thought, I should make that newspaper. And then I thought, no, we've done enough. It's fine. Next up was just some of the environment art, the Lichberg figures, named by, I believe, Buglord named those. Just these kind of cool trees. I really like the idea of showing nature that has been messed up and changed by the environment. And that's everything from the video. I actually had a blast making this video, like genuinely. I loved making that intro. It took me ages, but I'm so happy with it. And I am so thankful for the amazing world shown at the start of the video. That looks so cool. I mean, it's so crazy seeing something that you've like made like look like it's like a real image of a world. And to be clear, everybody kept saying, the world's really green. That's not what the world looks like now. That's what the world looked like before. So like that was meant to be like kind of a shot of like the world in like VHS from, pre-war in a way, like an intro. And yeah, I really hope you liked all the sound effects, the new music. Thank you so much to the amazing music, by the way. Like, I put it on the channel like 3 or 4 days ago, I think. And more music coming in the future. But even the sound effects, I'm so like happy with how it all came together. I really try to make it feel cinematic and immersive. So I really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you if you do enjoy it, and share per usual. If you did enjoy that video and you want to show extra support, please consider joining the Patreon. I'm going to be posting a lot more on Patreon, and you can even become a YouTube member if that's easier for you. And I'm going to be posting a lot more sketches. I've decided this year I'm going to be doing sketching most nights that I go to bed. And some of those nights I do digital sketching. And when I do, I'm going to share whatever I make. So there's already 2 pieces up there for a future video, as I'm planning on making this year have a lot more exclusive content. But if not, and you just want to get something that's real, you can go over to the merch shop and buy like miniatures or like a shirt if you really want, just something extra. But if not, thank you for watching, and thank you for taking your time out of your day to enjoy some silly art on a made-up world that isn't real, but I think is pretty cool.